We're now on Daf Ayin Gimel Amid Beis, and we're studying a ruling of Rava regarding a Asufi. As we said before, an Asufi is someone that we found in the street, and we don't know whether this person was his father, that person was his mother. We don't know anything. And he says that if somebody bothered to do the milah on the child, and we find the child, as we say, gemalt, then we're not going to assume it's an asufi. Because the psychology is that if the child is not kosher, and the mother is hiding haznus and concealing the fact that the child is a mamzer, then she wouldn't bother seeing to it that he has a milah, a bris milah. Kemet shehushlach machmas psula lohoisa imo malin. Okay, let's go on. What about an asufi that we found him mishalte hadomer, which means that after a child is born, they take the newborn baby and they subject it to a medical procedure by which they straighten out the avarim to make sure that all the avarim are in their place. For that, we have to learn anatomy. And here again, ein bo mishum asufi. I guess in contemporary terms, you would say, let's say the baby was pampered and they was wearing, nappy, was wearing fancy clothes and so forth and so on. Sheaf mishcha. What they used to do is take a baby and they used to rub oil on the baby's skin. Or umole kuchla. Or this baby that they found had a nayim mikucholos. They used to put a certain kind of a cosmetic chol, it's called, around the eyes of the child to be miyapid, to make the child look beautiful. Now we have a third case of remei chumre, that they put all sorts of strings around its body for refuah purposes, tlei pitka, or they put a kamiyah with a ksav on it, attached it to the baby. Again, in those times, that's what they did. And a kamiyah is very expensive. Vitale kamiyah. Okay, so what we're going to say is the following, that these chumrei were used for pitka. And when they put the kmiyah, which was a written document, they would tie it down with these ksharim, with these chumrei, right, utali kumra. And in all these cases, then ein bo mishum asuf. We're not going to be choshesh that because it was the child was a mamzer, the mother wanted to cover up about it. That's why she abandoned the child. This is indicative of a child that was coddled, that was loved, and she certainly didn't want to see the child die. And that proves that the child is a kosher. She was starving and she couldn't raise the child, so she hoped that somebody would find the child. Toli b'dikle. We found a child that was attached to a deckle tree. It depends. Imatule chaya. If a wild beast could attack the baby and devour the baby, then yesh bo mishum asufi. We have to be afraid that she had no compassion on the baby, and therefore she let the baby to die. Im lav. But if the baby is attached to a palm tree in a place that's not dangerous, and a chaya, a wild beast, could not possibly attack the baby, then we're assuming that she looked deliberately for a place that's not a sakonim because she loves the baby, and ein bo mishum asufi. Dartisa, zartisa, if we find the baby that has been placed on a certain kind of a tree called a zardasa, which is called ozridin, and Rashi, okay, I don't have access to the Rashi, but he goes into detail describing this semach. Then it depends. Smicha lemasa, if this ozridin tree is close to the city limits, yesh bo mishum asufi. Apparently, the shadim would occupy the areas outside the city. That's a very dangerous place to leave a baby who could be attacked by the shadim. But in Lav, if the Yulon is not close to the outer boundaries of the city, ein bo mishum asufi, since the mother was careful to put the baby in a protected area where there are no shadim, that proves that she had compassion on the baby. I don't know if you saw the that video of how a couple was, I think it was 8 hours, they were in a miklat, or 6 or 8 hours, I don't remember, because the Machshemom, they were killing right outside, and they had a baby, a newborn baby, and they were afraid the baby would suffocate because the Rishonim were throwing, so much fire, so much ash and hand grenades or whatever this. They were in the miklat, they were suffocating from the smoke inhalation. It's a very heroic story how the father was opening the window a little to see, and he found every couple of minutes the Machablim were busy elsewhere. He would open the window, which was very dangerous, to let in some air. And they were able to save themselves and the baby. If there's a Beit Knesset that's outside of the city, and many people daven in that Beit Knesset, ein bo mishum asufi. If you find a baby that was abandoned in a shul, then it's not an asufi. It means that the mother looked for a place where she was expecting and hoping that people of compassion would take in the baby and save the baby's life. V'im lav. But if it's a synagogue that's hardly used, it's outside the city, it's like a haunted house, haunted by mazikim and shadim, then yesh bo mishum asufi. Amar Meimar, hai pera de sufli, yesh bo mishum asufi. What's a pera de sufli? What they used to do is they used to dig in the ground, and they had ditches in the ground, and they would put seeds of date seeds in the ground, and the animals would come and eat those seeds. That was food for the animal. And it's outside the city, and there are a lot of mazikim there, and therefore yesh bo mishum asufi. If not for the fact that the child was a mamzer, she would never have treated her own baby in that fashion. Charifta denara, which literally in Hebrew means charifus hanar, that means the middle of the river, which is a place where the boats, travel back and forth on a regular basis, is ein bo mishum asufi. Apparently she was hoping, and she put in a lot of work to get the baby into the middle of the Nar, that some of the passers-by, meaning the ships that would pass by, the boats, somebody from the boat would see the baby and raise the baby. Pishrei, yesh bo mishum asufi. What's Pishrei? Pishrei is a place called Shipua HaNohar. In other words, that's where the river takes a very sharp turn down. And the boats avoid those areas. I guess they had signs, danger, don't, how do you say, not veer the boat, steer the boat, steer the boat away. So then we think that she had no compassion on the baby. No boats are going by. But on the sides of Rishus Rabin, people would find the baby. And that's considered Makom HaMishtabah. But Rishus Rabin, if she left the baby in the middle of the public thoroughfare where the wagons go, and there's Drisas HaRabin, Yesh Bo Mishum HaSufi, she has not indicated any compassion on the baby. There's an absolute rule that during years of famine, there's so much poverty, people abandon their child hoping somebody would find the child. It's not an asufi. The Gemara clarifies Rava. Hada Rava ahe. In which context did he make that comment? Ilema arishus harabim. If you're telling me that during a time of Rav, there's no din asufi, even if the baby is found in the middle of Rishus Harabim, is it possible that Aide de Shnei Ra'avon Katale, that because it's during a period of famine, therefore she would kill the child, so to speak, by leaving the child in the middle of Rishus Harabim where the chronos, and all the wagons will go by, the baby will be trampled to death? The Ella. So what's your other choice? Atzidei Rishus Harabim. So forget about Shnei Ravon. We said that Atzidei Rishus Harabim is not a Sufi even during healthy years. Is my area Shnei Ravon? I feel below Shnei Ravon. Ella ki itma de Ravaha. Rava was saying this not with regard to the case of Shnei Ravon, but rather the Omer Rabbi Yehuda, Omer Rav Abba, Omer Rabbi Yehuda Bar Zavdi, Omer Rav Tinok, a baby that was abandoned in a place where we should be choshesh of a Sufi is Kolzman Shebashuk. As long as the baby is still found in the shuk, Aviv v'imo ne'monim olav. A man and a woman could come forward and testify that they are the parents of this child. But nesaf min hashuk, once the baby was taken away from the shuk, ein ne'monim olav, they no longer have credibility to testify that this is their son. And the Gemara is going to have to clarify what's this all about and what's its connection to Rava. So the Gemara asks, first let's understand the din itself, the logic, my timer. Why do you differentiate between before it was Nesaf, when the parents are Nemon, are believed to identify him as their child, as opposed to after he was Nesaf, they're not believed? Amar Rava. The Chachamim were machmir not to believe the parents in the case of an Asufi Nesaf min hashuk, hol v'yotza love shem Asufi. In other words, I guess the parents know that this child is up for grabs. It's an abandoned child. A lot of parents, a lot of married couples, they want to adopt a child. It's very difficult to adopt a child. So they came forward and they said, that's our child. Because they knew already that there was a public proclamation that this child is an Asufi. It was Nesaf min hashuk. And now Rava makes his comment to B'shnei Ra'avon afal pi shenesaf min hashuk over v'imo nemonim olav. Even though it's already after he was Nesaf, which means that Bezdin put out a proclamation that this child is an Asufi, and therefore they were tempted to want to lie. No, we trust them. Because during Shnei HaRe'ova, many people abandoned their child. And the Chachamim didn't want to passel the child just because the word got out in public that this child is an Asufi. There are three people who have Ne'emanis credibility immediately, right after the Maaseh, not later on. Elu hen Asufi chaya upoteres chavruseo. Asufi had hamora. We know what an Asufi is, and therefore you're only believed immediately before the word gets out that it's an Asufi. Chaya, which means a midwife. This Sanya we learned to the Brisa. Chaya ne'menis lomar ze yotza rishon v'ze yotza sheni. If twins were born, and the question is who is the Bachar and who will get Pishnayim from the Yerusha, the midwife who had the birth, who was there at birth, she's believed to say who is the first baby that came out and who is the second. That she's in the room where the birth took place. But if she left the room, Yotza Bishov V'chazra, 8.5 minutes. That's according to Tanakam. Rabbi Lezer disagrees. Omer, Huchzika al Omda Nemenes V'yimlavin in a minute. The Mialedes is believed as long as she is in Omda. What's Omda? Omda means Makom Amidasa. And I guess that the Chaya, the Mialedes, has a certain place that she stands in order to help the mother give birth. And even if she didn't leave the room yet, according to Rabbi Eliezer, but she left her position, her station, even within the room itself, she forfeits her nemanis. And my beinayu, ikebeinayu the hadar apa, if the Mialedes turns her back from the baby, according to Tanakama, as long as she didn't leave the room, she's still their menace. She can identify the baby. According to Rabbi Eliezer, she's not believed, even though she never left the room. Because we require Huchzaka al Emdasa, or Omda. Now, the Mishnah says Poteres Chavruseh. No, I'm sorry, not the Mishnah, it's a Brisa. Wait, let me double check that. Is it a Brisa? No, I'm sorry. It's a statement of Rav Chizda. Right? So Rav Chizda said Shlosha De'eman Lialter, and the third on the list was Poteres Chavruseh, which means that as far as the laws of Dam Nida, she's believed to establish that her friend is not a Nida. Maihi, what's the case? This Nan, we have a Mishnah, Masechet Nida Daf Samach Amid Beis. Shalosh Noshim Shayu Yishenus B'mitachas. There are three women that are very tightly sardines in a bed. We don't know which of the three women had a Yitzias Adam. Kulam Tmeos. In other words, we assume that if you found the dam in this makom and one of these three women are closest to them, she's the nida. But in a case of mita achas, where there are dvukos and tchufos zu bezu, then it's as if you found the dam close to any of the three, because they move around. However, bodka achas mehem v'nimtzeis tmeya, if one of the three made a b'dika and she finds dam, then he tmeya v'kulon tahoros. That's called tliya. We could assume that this one is a nida, the other one The other two in this case are not nidos. And with regard to this din, Amar of Chizda, that's shebodka atzma b'shir veset. Who is the one that found the dam? She's the one that immediately, when they found the dam on the bed, she immediately made a bdika and found dam coming out of her makkah. Now we know that she's been flowing dam, and therefore we are metame her, but not the other two women. But let's say she waits a certain amount of time, more than kishir veset, then even though she finds dam in her bedika, that's not a proof that her dam came out also onto the bed at the time that they found the dam. She was tmeya. So therefore it's possible that this dam came out of any of the three women, and we cannot pater. Tana Rabbanan, we learned in a brisa regarding the nemonis of Mialedes, and that means that 4 women that gave birth simultaneously. One is an Ashes Kohen, one is an Ashes Levi, one is an Ashes Nasin, and the 4th is an Ashes Mamzer. And we don't know, we cannot determine which of the 4 possible mothers is the true mother of this baby. Nemenes HaChaya Lomar, here's where the Chaya steps out front stage, and she's believed to testify on each one of the Vlados. So 4 women gave birth, and we don't know who. The Chaya will tell me. She's going to point to one of the babies, Zeh Kohen. Another one, Zeh Levi. Another one, Zeh Nosin. Another one is a Mamzer. And all this Namanos is upgraded to the status of Yuchsin of Doraisa to identify who the Mamzer is. But Medvar Maburim, when is she believed? Kisha lo karale shem ara. In other words, nobody questioned the testimony of the Mialedes. Nobody knew otherwise. So we trust her. Aval karale ara. If, let's say, someone questions and contradicts her edus, meaning the Mialedis' edus, then she's not believed. So the Arar is saying that, the Mialedis says that this mamzer came from such a woman, and the Ma'ara is going to say, no, this mamzer came from that woman. Or let's say the baby. She's testifying to the Mialedis that this baby is kosher, and they're going to say, no, this baby came from a mamzer. Frek the Gemara, Arar to Ma. Which Arar is doche the nemonis of the Chayim, of the Mialedis? Ilema Arar Chad, one person comes along and he raises this irur. Amar Rabbi Yochanan ein irur pochs mishnayim. One person cannot be ma'arer against the din of nemonis hachayim. Ela ara detrei, we must be assuming that there are 2 people who are contradicting the Mialedes, and although she as Mialedes has a special status of Nemonus, that's only in terms of Nemonus of Eidecha, but now there are 2 Eidim testifying and contradicting Nemonus, then we rely on the 2 Eidim. Ibais Ema, we can offer another answer, Li Olam Emelach Arachat. Really, there's only one person who is contradicting the Mialedes. So it's 1 against 1. When we're dealing with a person who has a cheskes kashrus, then we say that irur is not effective if there are less than 2 Eidim. If we're saying that the kashrus is mutelis b'safek, and it's not known to the public, like for example, in our case, not one of the vlados has a chizkas kashrus, and it is beyond the safek, the pale of the safek. Is therefore based on his testimony. Chad nami mehemon. We're going to rely on the testimony of one aid. And that one aid is ma'arer and contradicts the aidus of the maledes, and therefore we don't believe the maledes. Now the Brisa says that if, let's say, you have 2 people that are fighting over ownership, who actually purchased this object, what is the nature of the nemanus of one person to testify? Neman bal mekach, the seller, is believed lomer lezeh machati lezeh ein machati, very similar to the case of the chaya. He can testify, know which person bought the object. When do we leave the mocher and his edus? That's only bisman shemikcho biyado. He's still holding on to the object that's being sold. And then he knows that he has to deliver it. So he's already, Ramya Nafshi, he's already concentrating who is the lokeh. Avol ein mikcho biyado. If the object is no longer in his possession, and let's say you have Shnai Mos B'tal, so 2 Bali Din or 2 potential Lokchim are fighting over who he sold it to, then Eino Neman. Why? Because he doesn't have to pay attention at that point to whom did he sell the object. He's not being medadek to be zocher who is the kona. And he may not remember who bought it. Like very often you come into a store, you offer to buy it, and then you change your mind and someone else buys it. So the mocher doesn't remember which of the 2 actually bought it. Why don't we simply clarify this by asking the mocher, who paid you? From whom did you get the money? So that means that even though the mocher has already delivered the goods to the lokeach, he still is believed to say, I know which of these 2 people was the buyer, because I know that he was the one who paid me. So the Gemara answers, Lo tzricha dinaka b'travayu. 2 people paid him for the same object. The Omer, and the mocher said, Chad midatoi, one of them I had agreed to sell it, v'chad bal korchi, and the other one just threw the money in my face against my will. V'lo yedia, hai midaito, v'hai lo midaito. He's not clear, he doesn't remember carefully which was the one who gave it midas, and which is the one who, as we said before, he threw it and shoved it down his throat. And since he's not really responsible for this mix-up, he doesn't have to remember who paid him and who didn't. Is therefore, he's second, and therefore he's not believed, right? And why isn't he believed? Because if 2 people paid him, it's not his responsibility to remember who paid him legally and who thrust the money in his face. Okay, so this leads us to the sugya of Dayanus, which will start in Mirz Hashem tomorrow, here on Daf Ayin Dalid Amid Aleph, with the Gemara of Neman, Dayan, Lomar, etc. Okay then? So wishing you a very fine evening without any, any bad news.